Hello, Alden. This is Daddy, and I'm just out on a walk, and I'm here to tell you the 6th part in the Crackle Saga. And this one is going to be called Crackle and the Mysterious Portal. For you see, their last journey across the desert ended when they saw something spectacular. And you might have already figured out what it was that they saw, but I'll tell it to you anyway. As they looked, they saw a giant structure made of black stone, a massive square, taller than 10 of them stacked on top of each other. And they thought that was pretty cool, but something was quite mysterious. In the middle of that structure was a purple, shimmering wave. And on the other side, they could almost see things flicker in and out of existence. And Crackle said, Is that a portal? And Layla looked at him and said, Oh my God, it is a portal. I cannot believe this. This is mysterious and crazy. They hadn't known what exactly the black square with the purple on it and the X had meant, but now they knew. They were going to be taken to another world. Given that they had just taken a portal to this mysterious world, the thought of going through another portal and ending up God knows where filled both of them with a little fright. Psych me into doing this, Layla. Come on, you just psych me into doing this. And Layla looked at him with eyes that were both fearful, but also had a glint of excitement. And she said, Crackle, we gotta do this. We gotta jump. We're never gonna accomplish our mission. And besides, doing things that require bravery and that you're scared of, that's how you get stronger. Crackle thought about it, and he said, okay. He tightened his strength belt, and he made sure that his knife sword thingy, his knife that could turn into a sword, was ready to go. And he said, ready. Layla tied her speed boots on, and she made sure that her bow was ready, and she had an arrow easily accessible. They walked towards the portal. The closer they got, the more they could hear a shimmering sound that resembled the sound of an electrical line when you're really close to it. Crackle said, maybe one of us should go first, just in case this thing zaps us into smithereens. And without saying anything, Layla sprinted off, and because of her speed boots, Crackle couldn't stop her. He had thought he was going to go first, but he was never disappointed in Layla's bravery. She went through and then disappeared. There was no electrified skeleton, no charred bone dust, or anything to indicate that she had been evaporated with the fury of 1,000 megavolts of electricity. So, more cautiously, he crept towards the portal and went through it. He got very, very dizzy, and it looked as if his vision were waves of the ocean swimming back and forth, and he got disoriented and felt almost as if he were going to go unconscious. There is a bee on my phone right now. Or a horsefly or something silly. But he didn't go unconscious, and after long last, this thing will not leave me alone. You're disrupting my story, you stupid fly thing. Okay, I think it's gone. But anyway, he didn't pass out, and soon he took a step forward, and what appeared before him was not what he expected. Nothing. Total and utter blackness. Darker than the deepest cave he had ever been into. Layla! I'm over here, she cried. Where are we? Said Crackle. I don't know, Layla answered. But walk towards me. And so they kept chit-chatting back and forth, once again in the dark, until they found each other. And once they were able to touch each other, Crackle said, What is going on here? And Layla said, I don't know, but let me see if I have any torches in my pack. And she opened her pack. There was no light of a torch, but there was a faint purple glow. What's that? Crackle said. She lifted out the purple flower he had found earlier. Whoa! These flowers glow in the dark, she said. Crackle dug into his pack. He too did not have any torches left, but he too had his flower, and he removed his flower. And the both of them seemed to grow even brighter as they were holding them in their hands. Cool, said Crackle. So they held their flowers in front of them and they explored. It looked as if they were in a structure built out of obsidian. Crackle didn't know how he knew it was obsidian, but he knew. He also knew that they were going to need a really powerful pickaxe to get through this. Hey, Layla, Crackle asked, do you by any chance have a diamond pickaxe? Layla dug around in her pack and said, yeah, I picked one up in one of the towns. Why? And he said, we're going to need this to get out. And Layla said, well, hold on, Crackle. Either somebody built this wall around this portal to keep us out, or to keep us from coming in, or somebody from our side of the portal built this to keep things from coming into our side of the world. What do you think could be on the other side? And Crackle thought about it. After the horrifying things he had seen, the tornado monster, the zombies, all the creatures, he didn't want to know what would require to build such a powerful wall to keep out. But he said, we're going to do it. We've got to. Let's go. And so Layla passed him the giant pickaxe and he started mining, and it took forever to mine one of these pieces of obsidian. His arms and his back were aching and completely paralyzed. Not paralyzed, but so tired they were almost paralyzed by the time he got one block out. He mined out 3 more, and Layla picked them up and put them in her pack in case they needed to close the door. And they walked through. On the other side was something that they had never imagined. It was what you could most accurately describe as a hellscape. There were waterfalls of lava raining down into lava lakes. The ground in parts was red and black. There were strange pig creatures meandering about. Pig creatures that looked like humanoid-shaped pigs. Humanoid pigs. They both ducked down in the entrance and said, what is this place? And she said, I don't know, but is this hell? And he said, I don't know. They looked around, and then something caught their eye. Not too far away was a wooden sign with some text on it they couldn't read from where they were at. So they both crept as quietly and silently as they could, crawling along the ground until they got to the sign. And do you know what it said? There was an arrow pointing straight ahead that said, those from King Edward's castle, come this way. Whoa, Crackle said. Layla said, finally, we're on the right path. And so they took the direction that the arrow on the sign had pointed, and they started walking that way. They had to run between little ridges in the evil black and red concrete or ground to hide from the pig creatures. But eventually, they crept far enough ahead that they found another sign. And this sign was pointing in a different direction. And it said, this way for the citizens of Edward's kingdom. And so again, they followed it. And they managed to dodge all the pig creatures by hiding behind red blocks and black blocks, and in a few cases by using their pickaxe to create a tunnel underneath some of the pig creatures. They didn't know if these creatures were evil, but they did not particularly want to find out. And finally, they found a third sign, and they repeated the process on and on until it had felt like they had been going on forever, past a never-ending landscape of lava and rocks and crystals and strange pig creatures, on and on and on and on and on, until finally they got to a very strange place. It was a giant castle made of black stone, and upon the walls were, Crackle gasped, humans in diamond armor. And Layla looked and said, oh my God, are those people? And without thinking, she ran ahead yelling, hey, down here, we're here. And one of the men atop the wall took out a trident and threw it at her, and it landed right in front of her feet. And she jumped backwards with a gasp. Halt, he yelled. And so she stopped and she said, wait, we mean you no harm. And the man on the wall signaled for another person to come over. This person had black armor on, and he had an enchanted sword that was glowing with a bright purplish blue color. He called down, who goes there? And she looked at him. Layla looked at him and said, my name is Layla. And she signaled for Crackle to come forward. This is my friend Crackle. We come seeking the people of King Edward's kingdom. And the man looked down at her and said, after all this time, why now? And so Crackle told him the whole story. He told him of his life on the other side of the portal. He told him of the strange hooded men who had come forth to try to steal the bow, which he showed the man atop the tower. and he told them everything that had happened since. The man looked down at Crackle and said, "My boy, you do realize in our kingdom it has been 1,000 years. Crackle looked at Layla, then he lowered his head. He said, "I guess there's no way our mother's still alive then." And Layla told him said the same thing. "I guess our mission was in vain." And the man said, "Dead? No. People live much longer here. 1,000 years is but a season of our life. Raise the drawbridge!" And a giant drawbridge in the black stone gate raised, and Crackle and Layla went inside. And much to their surprise, inside this strange hellscape, there were blocks with green grass on them growing carrots and potatoes and beetroots and everything else humans would need to survive. Strangely enough, there were villagers walking around everywhere. They were speaking in normal tones. There were shops and even children, goats, pigs, all the things humans would need to survive. The man in the black armor came down and introduced himself and said, "I am Prince Jargon. It's a pleasure to meet you." And Layla and Crackle reintroduced themselves. And the prince said, "Follow me this way." And he led them through a village that were behind these really large castle walls. And finally, there was a keep. And inside the keep, they went, and he locked the door behind him. And he said, "Come with me. You're going to want to see my father." So he took them up a flight of stairs and into what could only be described as a throne room. And in the center of a throne room was a throne made of blocks of diamond. And atop it sat a man with a gray beard and gray hair. He was holding a scepter in one hand, and he had a shield strapped to his back. "Father, I have brought forth travelers from the other dimension," said the man in black, the man named Jargon. And the man said, "My son, come." And the man stood, and he walked towards him and extended his hand in greeting. And he said, "I'm King Edward Jr. What are your names?" Again, they introduced themselves. And he said, "Oh, and you've come looking for your mother?" And he said, "Well, our mother or anyone else, or anyone who can tell us what's going on and why these strange men came through the portal looking for the bow." And he held out the bow, and the man gasped, and he said, "This is my father's bow. This is King Edward's bow." And Crackle said, "Yeah, my father gave it to me." And the man looked at him and said, Your father gave you this bow?" Crackle said, "Yeah, I didn't even know he had it. We've been in this other world for apparently 1,000 years, although in my world it only felt like 9 or 10. And the man looked thoughtful. He looked at the ground. Then he started crying. And he hugged Crackle and said, My brother! My brother! Could it be?" And Crackle said, "What do you mean?" Crackle said, "This bow, it was King Edward's bow. He disappeared very long ago. We all thought he was dead. There was a skeleton on his throne." Crackle thought about it. And he said, "There was a skeleton, but there was no way to prove that was King Edward. Are you saying my father is King Edward, who escaped to another world?" And King Edward Jr. said, "Yes, that's what I'm saying. At least it seems likely." Crackle looked at the man. They did look a lot alike. And Crackle hugged him back and said, "I had no idea I had a brother." And Layla just sat there going, "Can we skip the family reunion and find out what the heck is going on?" And King Edward Jr. said, follow me. And he led them into a room with a giant feasting table. And upon it were set cakes and all the other types of food they could possibly think of. And they sat down and they began feasting together. And King Edward II told them the story of what had happened on this side of the portal. He told them of a flourishing kingdom, a massive castle with many knights and squires and wise men and mages, everything you could imagine. In this kingdom, there was plentiful food, plentiful water, everything you could need. Sorry, I'm having to hit these gosh darn, it's like horseflies or something. They're trying to bite me. Everything you could need. The villages surrounding the kingdom prospered. There were children, there were schools, there were hospitals. it was as prosperous as it could be. And then one day, a portal had opened, and out from the portal had poured creatures. They were so black, they sucked the light in them. They made no reflections. They made no sounds. But everything they touched disappeared. And disappeared in a strange way. It was almost as if they evaporated. King Edward's knights valiantly tried to fight these creatures, but every time they hit one with a blade, the blade would disappear, and then the creature would touch them, and they would disappear. And soon after those followed creatures made of swirling black sand that would suck things into them and vaporize them. And it was at that point that King Edward realized they had to escape. He had both of his wizards create a plan. One of the wizards was to create a portal to a dimension which he said was unlike anything they had ever seen. And the other one was to create a portal to the underworld, a place that he called the Nether. He reasoned that if King Edward's kingdom were to split in two, they could send half to each location, and hopefully they would survive. Well, the plan was that King Edward was to stay behind with many of his loyal knights and try to defend the castle while the portals were built. So Crackle began to realize his father was perhaps the real King Edward, who had fled through the portal to the different worlds just before his castle fell. And King Edward's son, King Edward Jr., went through the portal to the Nether and has been living ever since. King Edward Jr. seemed very disappointed to realize that the kingdom was not remaining, and he thought it quite strange that his father had founded a circus and traveled all around the strange realm. He had never heard of such a thing as a circus, and he wondered why his father remained in hiding. But Crackle told him how big the world is and how many people there were, and he began to understand why strange blocky creatures couldn't just come through. Strange blocky humans couldn't just come through and live in the center of that world. And so they ate and they ate until everything was clear. But Crackle asked one thing, and this was the thing which they had come so far to learn. He said, "King Edward Jr., is my mother, King Edward's wife, your mother, still alive?" And King Edward Jr. rose to his feet and said, why yes, she is alive. Come, you will meet her now." And he led them through a winding hallway in the fortress until in the middle of the keep they came to a little outdoor area that had a beautiful garden filled with roses and lilacs and sunflowers. And in the middle there was a fountain. And on the edge of that fountain was sitting a woman who had gray hair on and a purple dress. And Crackle's heart jumped when he saw her. She looked so much like him. She looked so much like King Edward Jr. He knew now that they were brothers. He ran to her, and Layla stood behind watching, and King Edward Jr. also ran to her. And he made the introduction. "Mother, this is, believe it or not, this is Father's son. He was born in the other world. Father is alive." And she looked at him, her eyes wide in shock. Then she started crying and hugged him and then took her hands in his face and looked upon him. It's true? King Edward is alive?" And Crackle said, "Yes, alive and well. And he runs a circus and a carnival." And she said, What is a carnival and what is a circus?" And he said, "Never mind, I'll tell you all about it." So they sat for hours in the garden talking. And Layla just sat nearby playing with her bow and getting grass in her teeth because she felt weird intruding on the family matter. But at long last, they had caught each other up to speed, and Crackle's heart was feeling so full. And Layla walked up and she got introduced to Crackle's mom. And then they all looked at each other and they said, "What's next?" And King Edward II said, "Well, things here are not as great as they seem. Our kingdom is thriving, but truthfully, strange things are lurking in this dimension. Things are happening. We've seen these hooded figures that you have talked about. We have seen giant creatures made of magma, things that look like they could smash through our walls. Crackle, we need to get out of here. We need to return with you to the world that you come from. Can we? Crackle thought about it and said, we have a portal device. We can open the portal. And King Edward II sighed in relief. And the Queen sighed in relief. And they said, well, how long does the portal stay open? And Crackle said, as long as one of us stays behind, everyone will be able to go through, and then we'll have to come through last. But we need to warn you, each person can only go through the portal each way once. So this is a one-way trip. And he said, that is fine. Where we're staying, trust me, Crackle, this is not going to be safe for long. Just as he said that, the most massive, shrieking, hideous roar resonated through the castle. And then they could hear men outside yelling, to the walls, men, to the walls. And King Edward said, oh no, don't tell me we're too late. And Crackle and Layla and the king all ran outside. They climbed to the wall on top of the keep. There below them, they could see the villages that were inside the main castle. And they could see men running up to the walls of the main castle. And they could see, standing near the walls, creatures, giant creatures, made of lava. And atop them, on their shoulders, were riding men in cloaks, just like they had seen in their worlds. Oh no, it's too late, cried King Edward. And this is where our story will end. And tomorrow, we will come back for the final installment. Well, maybe not the final installment, I'm not sure yet, but the 7th installment of the Crackle Saga. And it will be called Crackle and the Battle of the Nether. I love you, my boy, and I would love to tell you the rest of this story tonight. However, it is 20 minutes long already, and I am being eaten alive by these gosh darn flies. Anyway, I love you so much. I hope you had a fantastic day, and I will see you soon. Mwah.